Okay, Max. So we're going to give you an evaluation from down the line view first. We've got Robert Rock on the right. We've got yourself on the left here at Frisco Lake. So setup looks pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, the things that we're looking at setup are how much are you bent forward, right? So 45 degrees. Uh, 42 degrees, right? So you're not a million miles away, right? The PGA Tour average is 41 degrees, right? Bent forward, so you're definitely in that range. Arms are hanging down from your shoulders, a little bit of knee flex, uh, chin's kind of in a nice position, nice sort of little rounding out with your shoulders at the top there. So setup looks good, mate. Setup looks good. Um, and then as we start moving back, really nice movement with the hand path going inside, the club head also moving inside. You can see how the shaft and the club head come up that red line to P2. You watch Robert Rock. His hands come a little bit more upright, right? Doesn't quite move his hand path as inward as you, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that you're right or he's right. Everyone does it a little bit differently, right? Um, and then as we go up to Peter, so what we're looking at that point is, right, well, have you turned, have you tilted, um, are you starting to extend, right? So the things that we're looking for is, have you started to move your left shoulder down, the position of the hands, the position of the club, have your knees started to straighten and flex, right? So as we go up to P3, which is left arm parallel with the ground, again, pretty good. Hands are a little deep, right? You say you've worked on trying to get your hands inward more. They're definitely more inward than Rocky's, right? You can see how his hands and club are kind of going through the base of his right bicep. Yours are a little bit more sort of underneath. So you're a fraction deep, right? But if we want to hit a push and a push draw, that's definitely where we want to be. You're in kind of a Zach Johnson position at that point, right? Knees are starting to straight. Yeah, the right knee isn't doing much, is it? The right knee isn't doing much. If you watch Rocky's knees throughout the swing, right, the further his club goes back, the more his right leg's straightening, the more his left leg's flexing. Look, even at the top there, right? As we get you up to the top, you're kind of keeping your knees pretty. I mean, you do a good job at the start, that bit, right? It's a little bit of straightening in your right leg, a little bit of flexing in your left, but then they kind of don't do much, right? So that's going to inhibit your turn. It's going to inhibit your tilt in your hips. The tour average with the hips is you want your hips to be moving or tilting 12 degrees, right? So imagine a stick across your belt line and your hip. We can maybe do it from the other angle, but your hips, we want to tilt about 12 degrees. Now, to do that, you can see how your leg has to straighten and flex, right? To be able to do it. If your legs are kind of just remaining in that flex, you can get a bit of turn out of them, but to get the tilt, you're going to struggle with the tilt, right? So as you get up to the top of there, you get up to the top. Besides from the knee flex, everything else looks really nice, mate. Your hands are very much behind your right shoulder, which I like. I like the fact that you've got your arm parallel with your shoulder at that point, right? That's all really good. So I like all that stuff. I like your wrist angles. Your right wrist is bent, your left wrist is flat. Um, and then as we start down to P5, right, you can see how his hands come down and the shaft comes down kind of on that top line. As we come down, the tour average, the patterns that we look for are the hands and the shaft kind of coming through the middle of the right bicep now, down to P5. As you come down, yep. Shaft and club are definitely coming through the middle of your right bicep there. So playing is very good, mate. That's excellent. That's really good. That's really good. The knee, the little bit of change in knee flex going back, then starts to come down into a flex there, into P5. So your transition's very good. Transition's very good. Let's get rid of those lines there. And then down into P6. So what we're looking for with regards to the turns at this point is down to P5. We want to turn, I'm talking about PGA Tour average, right? The hips get back to about 0 there, right? At P5, and then at P6, the shoulders get back to about 0, right? So if you've turned your shoulders 90 degrees to get to the top, by the time you get down to P6, which is shaft parallel with the ground, your shoulders want to be back to 0, which is kind of the position you were in at the start, right? So as you come down there, you can see how your shoulders maybe just a little flat. You can still see a lot of your left shoulder there, so maybe you're not quite opening your turns well enough there, right? Even though you're doing a great job with your hips, right? Your hips are definitely open at that point. And then come down into impact. At impact, we're looking for shoulders and hips out the way, right? So yeah, I would definitely give you a tick there, right, for shoulders and hips out the way. So that's really good. And then what we're looking for post impact is obviously hands and the club head exiting left, right? So obviously you move your hands and the club head inward going back. You come down and hit the ball, but then when we finish, you want your hands and the club head moving inward post impact, right? And yeah, I think you're doing a really good job there as well. I think you're doing a really good job there, and you can see where the club's exiting underneath your left shoulder, right? You can see the club face hasn't flipped over very much. The club face is just a little bit close to the plane of the club, right? So I think I think there's a lot of similarities from what you've got going on that you could compare with a professional. Good, really good, mate.